Good evening. This is Mr. M, bringing you Working in Saudi Arabia 101 for Dummies. Now today's topic is tips for British nationals who are in Saudi or thinking about going Saudi with reference to the Foreign and Commonwealth Office and British politicians. This is part 1. I'll be reading some of these notes, so I apologize for that. This is a carry-on from the earlier topics I've done. First of all, Boris Johnson, the present Prime Minister, got a free trip worth £14,000 paid for several years ago by the Saudi government to visit Saudi. Keith Vaz MP, aka the washing machine salesman Vaseline, made a trip to Saudi in 2017. Who paid for it? Vaz said he paid personally. Well, Keith Vaz is not known for putting his hand in his pocket, maybe into other people's pockets. He was brought repeatedly over the years in front of the House of Commons Standard Committee for his questionable behaviour, lying about receiving money, about favours, about complimentary hotel accommodation, monetary gifts. It goes on and on and on. So he went to Saudi and he said he paid for it himself. Or as another MP described him, as a crook of the first order. Next, Leo Doherty MP has accepted thousands of pounds from Saudi for paid trips. One reason for one trip was on the visit to see the Saudi-Yemen border region and to see the impact of ballistic missile strikes in Saudi-Yemen border region. What missile strikes, you might say? Well, occasionally you hear every month or two about the Yemenis firing a Scud into Saudi Arabia, but and he wanted this MP to understand the coalition's movements in the border region. Is this the Saudi-UAE one, or is it a UK coalition? Because UK and USA ground crew serve and staff the 48, get it? 48 bombers a day, which leave Abha or Khamis Mashat Air Base daily to bomb Yemen. But you don't hear that in the newspapers, or hear it in the newspapers, or read it in the newspapers, or hear it. So, whose coalition? More on that later. Another MP, Dr. Paul Williams, on another freebie to Saudi, said he had a long interest in the Middle East and Arab world when he accepted the money to go. Well, sure, he could have read a few books. I could have told him about those books. Right. The British government has an agreement with the Saudi Arabian National Guard, their communications and intelligence section, which was started in June 2013. So back to the coalition. Maybe Britain is part of that coalition indirectly. In 2006, Saudi Arabia told the British government to drop an investigation by the Serious Fraud Office relating to Saudi. Tony Blair, did what the Saudis asked. Now, another Conservative MP, Remen Christie, received £46,000 to provide advice to the King Faisal Centre for Research and Islamic Studies. That's from The Guardian, when he was still, of course, an MP. And here's another one. The imprisonment of the Saudi prince, which I mentioned earlier, the one we've never heard about and for which $2 million has been spent on getting a consultancy to free him with the EU, USA, and UK. Mr. Joseph Fontelles, Vice President of the European Commission, wrote on EU notepaper that the detained prince is an educated man holding a doctorate in law from the Sorbonne in Paris who enjoys a global reputation, and that this letter is a follow-up to an earlier letter to MBS. Fontelles also notes the arrest of the Saudi prince is outside any legal and moral framework. Pity our prisoner, free Richard H. He didn't go to the Sorbonne. He doesn't have inherited wealth. And he's a working man, so he can't be a philanthropist. Richard went to a non-private school. He's the son of Cornish farmers and has worked as a policeman, office manager, restaurateur, pump technician, and ESL instructor. Now, when you're in Saudi, follow the law. I'm against anyone breaking the law in any country they go to work in. I've always said this. But several years ago, there was a big boo-hoo on television and newspapers about a 25-year veteran of Saudi, Mr. Andre. He broke the law. He admitted he had bottles of alcohol, not one but many, and perhaps he'd done this fairing of alcohol for a long time. But all the boo-hoo got the British government to get involved. And Philip Hammond really grandstanded when he said the following: Carl Andre was released from prison 2 hours after my visit to Riyadh on the 28th of October. That was in 2015. The Foreign Office said about Carl, our embassy staff are continuing to assist Mr. Andre, including regular visits to assess his welfare. Ministers and senior officials have raised Mr. Andre's case with the Saudi government, and we are now actively seeking his release. Now, poor old Richard has had a number of problems, but he hasn't had much help from the FCO. And I'll go on to that in my next video. So, in part 2 of this, which is a video for British expats in Saudi Arabia, please tune in for part 2. Thank you.